Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly approving a plan for the Israeli Defense Forces to fully occupy Gaza, forcing Hamas to release the remaining hostages that are still in their grasp. A source telling a prominent Israeli journalist, quote, Hamas will not release hostages without total surrender. If we do not operate now, the hostages will die of starvation, and Gaza will stay under Hamas's control. The mandate for a deal was broad, but we did not get agreement, so we will go for occupation. The Israeli military reportedly controls nearly 75% of the Gaza Strip. The expansion would allow the IDF to conduct operations where they believe the hostages are currently being held. Hamas released harrowing footage of an emaciated Israeli hostage that was inside Gaza over the weekend, drawing international criticism and outrage in Israel. I want to bring in Fox News strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, this is quite a turn if the cabinet votes to fully occupy Gaza. It sounds to me, and I can't wait to get your thoughts on this, that they realize that there is no world in where Hamas has any control left in Gaza, and they're ready to move.
Well, there's a vast amount of frustration here on the part of the Israelis and also, the United States, because we've been partners with the Israelis in these negotiations with Hamas, through Qatar. I mean, the reality is after many, many, many weeks of negotiations to try to get that 60-day ceasefire, hostage exchange for prisoners and detainees, despite Israeli concessions, one after the other, Hamas still said no, no, no. So Israel is throwing up their hands here, and so is the United States. The United States leadership is very frustrated. There's a recognition that it's unlikely to get a temporary ceasefire and hostage release, that it's more likely to negotiate at some point an end-of-war strategy to get all the hostages out at the same time. But to do that, the Israelis have concluded that they have to put more pressure on Hamas to do that. And likely the pressure that's already been there's been nothing forthcoming. So that's what this really is all about. It's not a permanent occupation of Gaza. Certainly Israel doesn't want that, can't afford to do that. I mean, the IDF is a very small military, and certainly that would extend them quite a bit. This is about putting a pressure point on Hamas to get a final deal done. And a lot of the people will be asked to move to the south. Most of them have moved to the south and to the coast to get them out of the area of the conflict operation. There is danger involved here, because the Israelis have tried to stay away from the areas where the hostages are, and not too surprising, Hamas has concentrated a lot of their forces in that area. So to be able to go in there and occupy and also not put the hostages' lives in danger is going to be a challenging operation for the Israelis. They're highly skilled at doing this, but this is where they are. I mean, they're frustrated, and so is our administration, in dealing with Hamas here, and that's produced the results that you just announced.
Well, and obviously the fear is that they will execute the hostages. There's 20 remaining living hostages, and that is a very valid fear, and that's got to be torture for those families that just had to approve the release of that video from Hamas. I mean, there's another question on this. It seems that Hamas is starving their own people. We've had so many reports of Hamas taking these aid trucks. Of course, Hamas says that's not true. But what about the international story in all of this? How do you think the Europeans are going to react to this? How do you think countries that have just recently come out and said there should be a Palestinian state, there should be a Palestine? I mean, what is this going to do you think, in the world order? Because there's certainly going to be blowback against the U.S. and certainly blowback against the Israelis for all of this. How do you think that plays out?
Well, I think the international community will react strongly against anything that's, in their minds, protracting the war. And the reason why the war is being protracted is because Hamas will not make a deal to release the hostages in exchange for prisoners and some other concessions as well. I mean, that's where we are. But Israel gets blamed regardless. The food issue, certainly there are some issues there with food distribution. That's indisputable. But to blame Israel for all of that, I mean, it's unprecedented in the history of warfare that a state whose enemy population is having challenges, that state who's trying to defeat the military force that's governing that population reaches out and provides aid and food to that population. That's what Israel has been doing since 2 weeks after the war began on October the 7th. That's unprecedented. But yet they get blamed for not doing it well enough. They get blamed for the fact that Hamas steals some of the food and it doesn't reach the end state, which is to the people. So, listen, the propaganda theme that Hamas has had its success. There's no doubt about that. And it's unfortunate that the international community doesn't pin the rose where it should be on Hamas. The United States is standing up and speaking publicly about this and trying to lay the blame where it should be put, and that is on Hamas. And look at the Arab states. The Arab states, I mean, Cheryl, they want Hamas gone. They know there is no future stability with Hamas still controlling Gaza and inflicting a kind of horror that they have imposed on their own people, much less what they did to the Israelis on October the 7th. So they are in a place where they want this war to end. And I think the new predicate among the Arabs is not a pathway to a Palestinian state. They know that's pretty much off the table, given what happened on October the 7th. It's an end of war in Gaza and a recovery of Gaza, and then that may be a pathway to normalization with the Israelis, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the other Arab states as well. That process is still out there as a realistic political objective.
And before you go, General, just real quick, I mean, we should remind our viewers that there is video of Hamas operatives, soldiers that are celebrating and eating, and they look very well fed. And they're eating all this food and laughing. That video just was out within the last 2 weeks. So this isn't, but it just seems to me that, to your point, that Hamas, that negotiations are over. And there is no world in where Hamas can stay. I think the question now is what happens with the West Bank. Real quick before you go.
Well, certainly the West Bank still is an issue in terms of stability and security that has to be provided there. Where this is heading, likely it'll still result in some kind of negotiations at the end. But that pressure point is going to have to be applied to Hamas to get there. That's the path we're on. It's unfortunate that it has come to this, but the reality is we always knew from the beginning Hamas took the hostages in the numbers they did to guarantee their own survival. And that is where we are. The fact that they would kill the hostages, if they did that, and the Israelis were aware that that actually took place, then that would unleash something completely different on Hamas than what they're going to experience here, because then there would be no restraint on the Israelis whatsoever. So the deal for Hamas is keep those hostages alive to guarantee their own survival at the end of this. They just believe that they can get much better terms because of the international pressure that is being put on the Israelis and how Hamas has fed the propaganda themes to contribute to that pressure. They're going to continue down that path because they believe it has achieved some success for them. And they're right about it.
General Jack Keane, thank you so much for being here on what could be a big turning point in the Israel-Hamas war. Thank you, sir. Thank you.